Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Script Department. My name is John. I'm joined today by Caleb to discuss Resident Evil 4 Remake. How you doing, Caleb?
Doing good.
Cool.
How about you?
I'm alright. Before we get into all that though, if you haven't already, do make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on social media. Check out our website, see what our global community of writers are up to, and check out our other podcast shows as well. Great Hollywood Rewrite, Stepping into Frame, Women in Screenwriting, The Shortlist, Written for the Screen, and many more. Just search for The Script Department. And don't forget, you can buy us a coffee as well if you want to support us and the projects that we get up to. The links are in the description. Caleb, we are here to talk about Resident Evil 4 Remake. You are a big Resident Evil fan. I've only come to Resident Evil really in the last few years. Tell me where you're coming to with this game. How familiar are you with all this stuff?
Okay, so I hopped in around the remake of 2, always wanted to play it. We've done a lot of Resident Evil on this podcast, me and you. So for Resident Evil 4, I bought years ago, played the intro before I got fully immersed in Resident Evil, and just stopped after the intro of this game because it was so stressful. I didn't know how to play the game. I didn't know what the style was, so I wasn't prepared. So I stopped, and it sat there. So then around 2020, I was locked indoors and had played a couple of the other Resident Evil games, and so I was like, okay, well, I'll start 4. Played the original 4, and then flash forward to the remake. I was like, okay, well, now, yeah, I get to play the remake of 4 in 2's skin, the 2 remake skin. So I have just about the same feelings as I did with the original, as I did with the remake, and it just feels like with the new skin, so we can dive into those feelings, but I overall enjoy it, but it's got a lot of problems.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the game from a gameplay point of view, because I'm just, for context, I was a coward growing up with Resident Evil. I used to watch other people play them, but I was always really in love with the lore of Resident Evil, and I love the idea of Raccoon City and these underground facilities, and then the Resident Evil movies with Milla Jovovich. I was a huge fan of them back when I was a teenager. They were like my John Wick movies, these kind of no nonsense action movies. Don't give them a second thought after you've watched them, but always these kind of fun movies to have in the background when you're supposed to be doing your homework or whatever. And I used to just love all that stuff. But I was just too much of a coward to play the games. I came to Resident Evil in the games properly with Resident Evil 7 when I got my PlayStation VR. I really just wanted a big AAA game, instead, because I was just playing loads of small indie VR games because that was really all you were getting. And I just wanted, give me the proper Naughty Dog experience. Give me the Horizon Zero Dawn experience. Give me Resident Evil. And I wasn't getting any of that. And Resident Evil was the only one kind of really doing it. And I was blown away but not by the VR, but by the game itself. I love the survival mechanics. I love the inventory mechanics and all that kind of stuff, and the typewriter. I think, was it a typewriter in that game? I think it was.
In which one?
Is it always a typewriter, or in 7 was it something else?
They abandoned it, and then they made it the professional mode, hardcore mode, whatever they called it on each game. I don't know if that was in the original 4, but so they've kind of after 2 and 3, probably I think they abandoned it a little bit.
But on 7, I really had a blast with it, and then I loved 8 as well. But for me, the thing that just blew me away was Resident Evil 2, the remake of that. I just think I've always said Resident Evil 2 is one of the great video games of all time. It is, it deserves its place in the pantheon of great game-changing video games, no pun intended. And I love the remake. I think it's it is such a gift that game exists. You know, the idea that, like, when I finish that game, I'm always somebody who likes to really step back from a game after I finished it and, like, you know, just put it to one side, forget about it, and then come back to it maybe a year later and like try and play it as fresh as I can again. If I really love a game, I play it less, actually, weirdly, because I really want to cherish the game. There are games where I love them so much I want to platinum them, and I'll just, you know, obsess over them, like God of War or, you know, Spider-Man games or something. Yeah. But there are some games where, like, Death Stranding was one of those games where I played it, finished the story, and I said, okay, I'm gonna step back, I'm gonna relax, I'm just gonna wait. Cyberpunk was another one where I just said, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna, you know, but I always go back. Resident Evil 2, I loved it so much, but I was so stressed out from playing it. The Mr. X was just, like, in my haunting my dreams, like, and then I was like, that's it, I gotta take a rest. And every time I would go back to it, because I played it with the female character, I can't remember her name, Claire, is it?
Claire,
yeah. And Leon's the other guy, because there's the
in 2, yeah.
And who's the other guy, who's the other male character?
So the other two characters are Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield.
So kind of like, I keep getting Leon and Chris always mixed up.
Chris and Claire are the brother sister.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I remember I played as Claire, and then I wanted to play as Leon. And as soon as I started with Leon, I was like, Mr. X is waiting for me. I don't want to play this anymore. You know, it's just this thing. I would love it so much if they patched in a turn off Mr. X, you know, just have him as a boss fight later, whatever. I would just never stop playing Resident Evil, but I get opposite. I get so stressed out about Mr. X. Go on.
I did the opposite, so I got to experience Mr. X just being thrown at me. So that was really fun. Because I guess you said you started on Claire's story, right?
Yeah.
And then so I started on Leon's, so that was
he's there right from the beginning, isn't he? Like,
he's in there way more frequently.
Yeah, because there's that other section with Jill as well, isn't there, in that game? Yeah. But I love Resident Evil 2. I love the environment. I love the world building. I love the mythology around that environment. It's such a genius environment to choose. Like, you want to survive a zombie apocalypse? Yeah, police station. In America, yeah, police station. There's guns there. You know, like, it all just makes sense. And then the you know, the underground facilities and all that kind of stuff is just fantastic. And Resident Evil 3 I really love. I thought that's an extension of it. The point I'm trying to make here is, for me, quintessential Resident Evil is Raccoon City, Umbrella Corporation, mad scientists, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. With this, Resident Evil 4, I was so excited, by the way. Bought it launch day, opened it up, you know, like, loaded it up, couldn't wait to get into it. And then it was like, okay, cool. Stepped on a bear trap, or whatever they call them, you know, the
you're like, oh, this is how it's gonna be. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, okay, no, that was no, keep stumbling, keep stepping in them, can't see them for the life of me. Got my giant 50-inch TV, you know, like, can't see them for whatever reason, you know, for the life of me. Anyway, that's on me. But I had this weird experience with it, right? I'm going to get to the point now. I had this weird experience with it where I was so bored by the story. I was so bored by the world. I thought, it's caves, it's a village, it's another village, it's not a very well designed village, if I'm being honest, you know, and just all that kind of stuff. And then and it's more paths that you have to follow, and more of this. And then I thought, and yet I can't stop playing this game. Like, I would put hours into the game. I would say, okay, I'm only going to play for like half an hour because, you know, I got some work to do, and then it would be 3 hours. And I'm never like that with a video game. Like I said, I'm the guy that if I love a game, I'll put it away and I'll like come back to it after I've had time to just like let it settle with me and stuff like that, and then I'll give it some more time, and I always try and keep it as fresh and kind of as fresh an experience as possible. And this, I just couldn't stop playing it. I was such a badass playing it. Now, admittedly, I'm still a coward. No matter how old I get, I'm still a coward in these games. So I was playing it on an easier difficulty. Maybe the easiest difficulty at times, but I was just in it for the fun, in it for the story, not in it for the horror or anything like that. And I don't know how I feel about this game, because on the one hand, I think I think the story is completely laughable, and I think there are some genuinely mind-blowingly dumb story decisions in this game that affect the game. And yet at the same time, I'm like, give me more zombies or whatever. Give me more infected locals or whatever. I just want to keep going through this. So it did get to a point where I wanted it to end at some point. Like, it was at a point where I'm like, all right, I'm done with it now. And yet I'd be like, all right, I'll block off another 2 hours and I'll just go through it. So
yeah, I was the same way.
Yeah.
Even with playing through it the first time, by the time you get to the island, I just want it to be over. And then same thing with the remake. I just want it to be over, even though like you said, like the gameplay is so addicting. Like you can't put it down. You feel like it's just satisfying every aspect of the gameplay, like the store inventory system, like all of that. Even though, because they added an auto inventory on this one, I would accidentally hit that every once in a while. So it didn't have the satisfaction as the original, like where you cannot auto.
Yeah, you have to figure out where
you have to actually
yeah.
move everything around.
Yeah.
So that kind of killed it for me, because even though I didn't want to use it, I found myself using it. And so but I think, like, for me, the problem with this, even though like the gameplay is so good, there's parts of this game that are so campy that it's good. I feel like this game, and it works for a lot of people. Like this is a lot of people's favorite. Like people are even claiming this is the best remake ever, which is, I mean, it's great in that aspect. But in terms of like a person sitting down and enjoying the story, the gameplay, all that stuff, I feel like this game is what like, I guess, flew too close to the sun in the Resident Evil franchise. Because if you look at Resident Evil 5, I don't know if you've ever played that one, but that one is
that's atrocious.
Yeah, especially like there's fun parts of it, and if you have a friend who will grind it out with you, it's a good time. But it is,
if you play it with a friend, it's
the
okay.
Downward,
yeah.
I tell the downward trajectory of the franchise.
I tell a lie. I did actually play Resident Evil 5 before, like years ago. I was just like 10 minutes in, I was like, nah, not for me. But I remember playing it then a little bit later with a friend, and we were like actually having a bit of fun. But then I couldn't get that, like, we couldn't come back. We just didn't want to go back and play it again, and so it was just anyway, continue. Sorry.
But so this like kicks off that action, like it's ramping up the B movie style.
Yeah.
Of like, let's just keep going up and up and up, and which is what this game's, if you look at the structure of this game, it's taking that, what we know as Resident Evil, and it's giving you that first section, and it's kind of ramping it up a little bit with the action, instead of, whereas like in 2 you have a gradual ramp, but the zombies stay slow, and it's more just like the bosses that develop.
I'm so glad that you said it's like a B movie, because I don't think, when I played Resident Evil 2 and 3, there's some cheesy moments in them, but you get the vibe that they're not going for like cheese. They're going for like, they're trying to stay true to a game that was written at a time when games writing wasn't that amazing. right? Um, and it's not a like a. I'm not being critical. It's just games writing was always, it was always very
It hadn't been
reaction.
developed by that
Yeah, it
time,
was. It
right?
was the
Like,
process. The best practices weren't fully there. It was always more of a kind of a reactionary thing to kind of just go with the game itself and like almost like justify aspects of the game or whatever. And there's a whole conversation to be had about that and how storytelling has evolved in video games. But I always feel like the original Resident Evil games were trying their best to be legitimate, serious dramas, almost like drama within the world of a horror kind of setting. These relationships between characters and so on. Not ham-fisted, not shoved down your throat or anything, but just this kind of more almost understated a little bit, within the overall survival kind of world building. It does feel to me that Resident Evil 4 is trying its hardest to be like a cheesy B movie, where like it almost feels like, let's make something that feels like it's like Commando, or the kind of the real cheesy over the top action stuff from the 80s, where it's like they know what it's those two guys at the beginning. I can't remember the names of the characters in Predator, but it's Dutch and the guy from Mandalorian. I can't remember, but they're doing that kind of like they're shaking hands, and it's like they're doing like this arm wrestling while shaking hands, kind of, and they're like the biceps are just bulging and all that, like, and that's and you just think it's like its ego is driving this storytelling, and it feels very much like they're trying to tap into that in this game, where it's laugh out loud at times how ridiculous it is, how not credible these characters are. You can have the most over the top world, you can have the most over the top incredible action or whatever, but you can still have credible characters. And sometimes that's all you need. It's just to ground everything. There is nothing credible at all about this, with maybe the exception of the president's daughter, who even then feels like she's really not that traumatized by everything that's been going on.
yeah.
And so I'm glad you say B movie, because that, if you wanted to, if the creators told me tomorrow, yes, B movie is exactly what we're going for, then guys, game of the year, you have nailed it. Like, I think it's too easy to say that though. But here's the funny thing: if it is a B movie, and that is the general direction that Resident Evil is now, I think Village and Biohazard have kind of pulled away from that, obviously. But if
for sure, yeah.
If 4, for example, is considered to be the best Resident Evil game, and it is intended to be a B movie, then maybe we're being too hard on the Resident Evil movies. Because if anything, they are probably the most authentic stories.
Yeah.
Most authentic adaptations, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm rambling. Okay,
Yeah.
would you consider Resident Evil 4 to... Okay, would you consider Resident Evil 2 to be a scary game? And would you consider, if you do, or like, how would you rate Resident Evil 4 as a horror game compared to this? Because they are in the horror sections of the PS Store and all those other, stores and categories and so on. How do you feel about the horror side of things?
So there's a couple. First, so this year I've only played survival horror games by accident, but it's also because it keeps my attention for the little time that I have.
Well, the big tentpole releases over the last few months have been horror, haven't they?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So I played Callisto Protocol, not very good. It's just a very like heavy AAA game.
It's paint by numbers.
And then I went, like, and I wanted it to be good, but then I played directly after that, which really showed all the flaws in that game. I played Dead Space. Yeah. Oh my god, that game is fantastic. The gameplay is so good. You can just see it's very. I mean, it obviously owes a lot to Resident Evil, but just the genre. But like, you see the actual game design playing out in Callisto or in Dead Space that is not there in Callisto Protocol, and then went directly into Resident Evil 4 remake. So I've been a little desensitized this year to scary games. So I picked up Resident Evil 4 and was like, I want to be scared. So I played it on hardcore mode. That was a terrible idea because it was very hard, and it just made the game even longer, and so like it made it more stressful too. So I think that what the Resident Evil franchise does so well in the terms of horror is it starts out scary, but it's scalable in the gameplay, so that way by the end of it you feel like a professional. And so that way it gets less and less scary the farther you go. And I mean probably all survival horror for the most part. Um and so like by the time you like upgrade your weapons and you're really good by the end of it, especially with Resident Evil 4 where it's like just over the top, just one upping itself all the way throughout. And so that's where I think 2 has a good like scale of that where it's not too, you don't get too much by the end of it, but you like it keeps throwing bigger monsters at you to where it's still stressful, but the story is at least there. Whereas when if we jump to 4, it starts out that way, but from the big get go, it's like just throwing hundreds of enemies at you. And that's what I found with hardcore mode on this was the most annoying thing to me was the game just feels like it thinks, okay, you want it to be harder. Well, here's more enemies. And it just keeps throwing more and more at you. And I'm like, that's not really like it's more of an annoyance because now it's just rinse and repeat for me. And so especially by the time you're good and you're just wiping through people, it's like, okay, well, I have ammo, now it's gone. I gotta go find more ammo, and then it's rinse and repeat. Um, so that was my big problem with this game. Really was that by the end of it, it just keeps doing that, and then it throws you on the island where it's like, forget everything you know because here's armored people, and it's fine, but it's that's that.
It's just
I think
more
that's the
action.
problem.
It's just more action. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And that's what like so that's what this game, because it was successful and people liked it, and it is fun, but because of that, you look at Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6 where they kind of lose their way from the origins
Mm.
of the series, and then 7 goes back to that.
But
Um
that's the thing that puzzled me with this game was that I did, okay, I play horror games on easy mode. I am a total. I love the. I love. I've always said the best horror out there is in video game land because I've always said Alien Isolation is the best Alien movie that was never made. I've always said that Resident Evil. Like I've always been a huge supporter of Resident Evil, a big fan of Resident Evil. I just was never brave enough to play them when I was a kid, and I just never got around. When you're playing on a PS4 or a PS3, you're not really going back to playing Resident Evil 2, on those graphics, or like at a certain point you kind of move away from that stuff, and you kind of I always felt like I've just missed the boat on these games, and so I'm never I'm not gonna go back to them. But now having all these games available to me, I'm like more than happy to go and play them. But I will always play them on easy because I want to be able to finish them, and I know the kind of gamer I am. I will quit if it gets too stressful for me. I'll be like, nah, I'm out, guys. I'm out. Sorry, I can't do this. And so I play them on easy so that I can have the best chance of experiencing them and experiencing the story and the world and the characters and all that. I was very surprised by the way that this game went, because at a certain point I was thinking, isn't this the thing everybody complains about Resident Evil? Everybody always says, yeah, but with 5 it went down the action route. I'm like, but this game has the action route. It's 100% action. I thought, when I heard there was a stealth mechanic in this, I thought, okay, of course, because you have to avoid encounters, and stealth always makes for a much scarier game, I think. If you look at games like Outlast or Alien Isolation, it's the fear of getting caught so much as it is the fear of them attacking you. It's the fear of just the alert going up, like you've been spotted. The music just jumps or spikes. That stuff always makes for much more tense situations.
Even look at the lickers in Resident Evil 2.
Yeah,
you don't want to trigger a liquor fight because you know it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
Like,
and
it's going to take your resources.
And I thought, for example, we were going to have this moment where, like, you go into a field full of farmers and they're all just there, like, looking for you, and you're in the tall grass and you're ducking down trying to avoid them, or they're like statuette style character, like villagers that are just kind of like clickers in The Last of Us that are just that are sleeping or something like that, and you have to get past them without waking them or something. Like, I thought there'd be lots of that kind of stuff, and there really wasn't. I don't think even on easy mode, I don't think I made it through a single section stealth wise. Like, and eventually I was just like, I'm just gonna shoot these guys because it's just more fun. It really didn't feel like a good stealth game, and I did wonder why that mechanic existed. And there's no moment, by the way, with the exception of the sound-based villains, which only appear twice in the game, where you've got they're like these big hulking things that I
think it's the regenerators, the ones that you have to like shoot in the Is that the one?
No,
like,
no,
the
no,
ones that
no,
you have
no.
to, like, shoot the parasites.
I mean, those guys just piss me off. But and admittedly, actually, they were kind of creepy, actually. But I was just like, oh god, those guys again. But they're like these kind of guys. I don't know how to describe them, but they're like giant.
I'm blanking.
They're like giant orc style characters. Like, they got all the kind of metal stuff covering their face, whatever.
Oh yeah. It starts with a B. I don't remember how to. It starts with a G. Gyarados or something.
Whatever. You have to avoid the chains, and you have to, you have to avoid making sound. You have to distract them and all that.
Yeah.
Those were the only characters, the only creatures in the game. The only two moments. There's two encounters with those, as far as I remember, and they're the only times that stealth play a role. And you didn't need to make a stealth mechanic in the game for that, because you could have just given me the ability to just, like, you didn't have to build the levels in a way where I can theoretically stealth through them. I would love to see a Let's Play where somebody makes their way through the entire Resident Evil game without, as much as it is allowed, without getting caught. Because what is the point in having it if like, you can go through Metal Gear Solid without ever killing an enemy. Like, you can get trophies for being the pacifist, and only killing the bosses, and that is because Kojima recognizes, if I'm making a stealth game where you're supposed to avoid confrontation, I have to be able to follow through on that, and I don't think Resident Evil 4 follows through on that.
No.
It
does, because it was kind of, I think you can do that in the original. Like, there's a few moments, if I remember correctly. I know you can, like, roundhouse kick people like you can in this one, but that's what the original brought in. So yeah, I don't think they ever deliver on that, like, because it feels more just like, okay, it's introduced and then it's kind of there, but you can't really.
I didn't think there was any horror in this game. I thought there was action, but I never ever, walking down a corridor, seeing a shadow moving in front of me, or hearing a sound in the distance and thinking, oh crap, that's for me, I bet you. There was never any of that. And horror can come in a variety of different ways, but it shouldn't be difficulty contingent. If a game is only scary, if a game is only scary because you've ramped up the difficulty, then that's not the game being scary. That's you being stressed out by the game. And I always think great horror is horror before you've even hit play. Like, a great horror movie has done its job before you've even, like, gotten through the opening credits, because your imagination has already you've already convinced yourself there's somebody under the bed. You've already convinced yourself that there, you get that you feel that itch and you think, is there a bug on my, on my leg or something like that, while you're asleep or something, and then there might not be, but you've convinced yourself there is, and now you can just feel ants all over you, and like that is great horror. That is your imagination doing the work. And I get that in Resident Evil 2. Every time I heard any sound, I'd be like, oh, that's Mr. X, I bet you, or
yeah, just the footsteps of Mr. X alone are like, I got my friend to play.
Yeah.
He's playing through Resident Evil 2 right now. And just us talking about it, it's been a couple years since I played, but the first thing that I'm talking about is the footsteps of running away from Mr. X, or like him coming towards you.
And I remember my first experience playing it with, and first time you encounter, like I knew, once you run away from him and hide from him that first time, I remember thinking, like, just waiting in a room and just being like, okay, he's out there. And he could have been on the other side of the map, but as far as I was concerned, he's outside the door. And I just thought, I don't know. And I remember even with, is it Nemesis in Resident Evil 3? I remember being in a safe room, or what I thought was a safe room, and like waiting. I'm just like, is he out there? Is he, and then suddenly he just kicks open the door. And I'm like, oh my God, like, how is this? He's right there. And I just jump and I nearly threw the controller. Like, and I just think there is, jump scares are not the be all and end all of horror. But I don't even think there was a jump scare moment for me in Resident Evil 4. It's and to me, all of that, I know I am conscious we're talking about gameplay here a lot, but it does all boil down to the narrative, because it's the narrative that's leading you into these spaces. It's the narrative that's leading you into these moments where the horror, gets ramped up. And the narrative of Biohazard, Resident Evil 7, the family, the backstory, the mythology of the family, and so on, and the house itself, and the arena where you're in, all of that makes for terrifying gameplay. I don't think there's anything genuinely scary. There's tension, sure, not that much. And I'm saying that as the guy who has to play these games on easy mode just to barely get through them. Like, even easy mode isn't enough for me sometimes, like, so have your fun with me there. But like, it's like, I should be the guy who's like, that was too scary for me, and you're all rolling your eyes.
You should play Dead Space.
I know, right? And I want to so badly. Like, but for me it's like, what does it say when, okay, I'm gonna I was looking at when this original game came out, 2005. This is story now, right? Yeah. 2005. Snake Eater comes out 2004. That to me is the benchmark for awesome game design, PlayStation 2 era, right? Coming in kind of tail end of PlayStation 2, I guess, isn't it? But
yeah.
But not really, I guess, actually, if Resident Evil 4 still comes
it's
out.
like middle, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
I guess middle, yeah.
Yeah.
But Metal Gear Solid 3 blew me away, right? And I'm playing Resident Evil 4, and I'm like, okay, we've got the hero going in to this European, right? Am I correct? It's European?
Yeah.
I want to
in Resident Evil?
Resident Evil 4, yeah. Going into
Spain, I believe.
Yeah, it said Spain, but then I was like, I don't know, maybe it's my own fault for not studying the letters and the evidence and stuff enough, but I don't know, I wasn't 100% sure. I mean, obviously I recognized aspects of it, but I wasn't sure if it was somewhere else in Europe as well or something. Anyway, but okay, so you got these European destinations, the American agent being sent in to rescue somebody, and finding all hell is broken loose in this environment, and if I don't stop this super weapon of whatever it is, there could be millions of lives lost out in the rest of the world. While I'm doing this, I've got voices in my ear telling me what I got to do next.
Yeah.
And there is that combination of stealth and action. And it turns out the big twist in the game is that your military superior mentor is the person who orchestrated the whole plan.
Yeah.
You know, not to mention the unspoken government conspiracies that exist in Resident Evil to that allowed Umbrella
Yeah.
to do their
You
thing.
should see the original comms screen on Resident Evil 4. It's a box in a box,
Yeah.
like of the two voices. So
To me, I remember I was just playing this game and thinking, this feels very Metal Gear Solid 3, right? And it's the Japanese
yeah.
games company trying to tap into the Western style of storytelling, and Metal Gear Solid 3 is cheesy as hell when it wants to be as well. But I just remember thinking, is it just me, or is this Metal Gear Solid 3 with a different coat of paint, like, and downgraded mechanics? Like,
Yeah,
Metal Gear Solid 3 is... I don't get why people... I'm sorry, I just don't get it. Resident Evil 4, I know if you love the game, more power to you. Like, I do need an education on Resident Evil games. So, like, but I need somebody to explain to me why this is the great Resident Evil 4. Like, it's not happening it's not clicking
it's
with me.
so I think for me it's like a weird, like I fell into like a weird timing. I didn't play it when it first came out, like, so it's not like super nostalgic for me. But it is somewhat nostalgic because of the time that I played it in was this very like monumental time in everyone's life, like we're locked indoors and I'm looking for games to play, and I had a good time with it. Like it did drag on, but I think that what this is the I don't think that this remake is the quintessential way to play this game. I think it's you have to play the original to get
Yeah, okay. Okay.
what the game is, because like the gameplay is amazing, the remake, like the polish on it is amazing,
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful.
but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that the whole campiness of the original game is is works in its favor because mechanics are clunky. You can't move. It's stop and pop gameplay. Like so you like this was one of the first third person shooters, if not the first, I think, or something like that. I don't know. It kind of started that whole perspective, or at least that way of action, I think. Um and so like you had, it was called stop and pop, so you literally had to stop while you're aiming, and which the you don't have crosshairs, I don't think, unless you get the red dot, like, or the laser or whatever. So like it's very hard and clunky, but the people are a little bit slower in the original. And so like all of this like kind of adds to the campiness of the story. And even in the remake, I think where the remake goes wrong for me is they tried to do the whole like, okay, we're taking the extremes farther and farther apart. We're taking the horror farther, trying to make it scarier. And we're taking the comedy or the campiness farther by like Leon's lines, which character wise doesn't work for me, I don't think, because he's like, when did he become a dad joke guy?
Oh
Um,
my god, the dad
because like
jokes. Yeah,
also
that's it. Yeah, the dad jokes are insane in
also
it. Like,
so where I think that his character falls apart for me, um, with what they're trying to build, like if they're trying to build out his character. Okay, so we have Resident Evil 2. He's a rookie. He's like bright-eyed, and this story that plays out in Resident Evil 2 Jade makes him jaded. So we pick up in Resident Evil 4, and his opening monologue is how Resident Evil 2 made him a jaded like FBI agent or whatever, right? But then he's making dad jokes throughout the whole game. And like he's always undercutting that grittiness that his character is supposed
yeah,
to have.
and he's
Um
also always undermining the threats. Like, you'll get
yeah,
these
yeah.
big, like, there's these giant characters that will walk into a room and you're like, oh crap, I have to fight this guy. And he will make these jokes
He'll quip.
that yeah, these quips that don't land, and all it
No.
does is suggest, well, if Leon isn't scared of this guy, maybe I don't need to be. And whereas when I think about Alien Isolation, I'm like, Amanda Ripley was terrified. Like, everybody was terrified. There wasn't a single person that wasn't just like breaking out in a cold sweat at even the sound of the alien. Oh my god, it's here, you know? And there wasn't a single moment where I thought, and I very quickly learned I don't need to be afraid, because worst case scenario, is it Jill Valentine? No, not Jill.
Ada,
Ada.
or
Ada
in
Wong,
this
isn't
one?
it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Ada Wong.
Ada.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, she's in Resident
yeah,
Evil 2. Sorry, Jill
yeah.
is Resident Evil 3, yeah. Ada's just there in the background. She'll probably kill him if I don't, you know? So I just thought, yeah, very. I don't like Leon in this. I think he's.
Well, and even so even like to more of like them taking the extremes farther and farther, they redesigned Salazar, which may have been for other reasons, but they took his campiness away, like, and tried to make him more of like a proper looking villain, older looking, kind of like grosser. Whereas in the original, he's very campy and looks more like, so you can't really tell if he's old or if he's a kid. And there's kind of this weird, like, I don't know what to think, like what age to think this guy is. Um, and so like they abandoned that, and then then they have the campiness of the dialogue. And so that's where I think it's like this game very much like does everything that it wants to do and not to like the betterment of the game.
Yeah, and this I think this leads into a very interesting point, which is the subject of remakes in video games. I read this really interesting article after The Last of Us Part 1 came out, which was that no remake goes unchanged or something like that. Basically, the argument was that the graphics in The Last of Us Part 1 are so and they are incredible on the PS5. Like the new, like I've somebody who's played The Last of Us more times than I can count. It is like playing a brand new game for me. Like it is, you know, the nuances in the characters and the way the characters, you know, you think you understand what a character is saying in that moment until you see them, you know, like eyes, expressions, you know, furrowed brows, all that kind of stuff. Like the most beautiful subtleties. You're like, oh my god, I understand that character 100 times more than I ever did before. You know, whole moments recontextualized in my mind just from my reading of it, right? And maybe it's just me, but that's just, you know. And that article kind of underpinned that, which is that you can improve, but improving, even if you are as faithful as possible to not changing anything, improving those graphics gives us an opportunity to read in and extract more information than we would have before. And I do think there is this kind of dichotomy going on in the games industry right now, which is we want to remake the classics because games preservation is really very weak generally across the industry. So we want to bring these games back and we want to make money off them and so on and so forth. We need to polish them up. We need to stay faithful to the originals. Like we need to stay faithful to what fans loved about them, but we also have to kind of polish the graphics and stuff like that. And in doing so, you are unavoidably making changes and making little additions and so on, like what you've explained with Salazar. For me, I wonder, is part of the problem here that they're staying too close to the original? And my question is, why would they need to? Because I can buy the original Resident Evil 4 on the PS Store right now. Like, there are some games I can't buy anymore. And so remakes are the only way we'll ever get them. Or re-releases or whatever. But in this game, I can play Resident Evil 4. And I was tempted last year when it was first announced. I was tempted to go and get Resident Evil 4. The original version. Or at least whatever version was available on the PS4. On the PS Store. Now I'm like, I'm all I really getting here. Like I'm paying $70 for just a coat of paint. Is that it? Because I don't get, like, you're clearly trying to be faithful to the original, but I don't get why you should be faithful to the original. It's not like I have to pick and choose which game. I can play both. How do you feel about that? Like, do you think that they, like, if you, Does it bother you when they stay too close to the originals, or like with remakes, or
Um,
do you like things being shaken up a bit, or how precious would you be if you were like if they were
yeah,
taking your favorite game and doing that, or with Dead Space, for example, like
yeah.
if they were shaking that up?
So I think that Resident Evil has done the best job at remaking their games because they have stuck true, but they develop it. Um, and 4 even does that. Like 4 develops areas, changes it up where it needs to be changed. And so that's why some people are saying this is the best remake because they changed what needed to be changed. Obviously, some stuff is up for argument for people, um,
But that
but
dialogue,
then, and
like
then
that
oh well, yeah,
dialogue, is cheesy as hell. The
yeah,
storytelling is dreadful. Is
yeah.
genuinely dreadful. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like the gameplay itself, they might have made those upgrades to it, but even then, it doesn't feel like a 2023 video game. It still feels like it's just
Oh
a
yeah,
more
yeah.
fluid. Like so again, why stick to that? You know, like why be so
Yeah.
committed to that? Like you're not doing that with the new Resident Evil games. Like you've changed up the formula with Biohazard and all that. I don't know. I just don't get that kind of slavish devotion to certain aspects where you have a chance to redesign this game from the ground up and do it better than it ever was, even if it was amazing in 2005. And you, sorry, you made a point. Sorry, I know I'm hijacking this, but
Yeah, yeah,
you made
no,
a
yeah.
point previously about how you kind of had to play Resident Evil 4 before in order to kind of appreciate it now. I completely agree that that would probably be a big help, but I didn't feel I needed to do that with Resident Evil 2 or 3. Like I came to them pretty brand new. Like I had memories of Resident Evil 2 or 3, but I didn't even remember like Nemesis or anything like that much. And I played these games and I thought, wow, you've really done an amazing. Like this feels like a 2023 game. Everything
Yeah.
felt appropriate, you know. I don't know. This Resident Evil 4
I
just felt
think
like it's yeah.
yeah, and I think they did, if I remember correctly, I think they did develop some of the narrative on this one, like some of the characters. Um, so I don't think that they completely skipped over that, like narratively. Um, I have a friend in the games industry who's a designer, and we always have interesting conversations because he could care less about a narrative. He looks just at the gameplay, which obviously, I mean, makes sense. But we're you and I love to talk about the narrative design of a game of a game, and so it is interesting because, like, I think that there are people who just look at the gameplay and don't worry about any of that, and I think that that might be where some like a lot of this it come like the love for this game comes from because it is that like over the top cheese, and so it's enough for someone to just kind of check out, laugh at, and not like take too seriously. um and I think that that's where the regard for this game is the gameplay, what it did for the third person genre. um but which is where a lot of our problems are, and why I think that like 2 is such a better game in terms of structure, in terms of how the narrative design plays into the game design, um, because of the the survival horror genre. So I think all that weighs in for me of like why just hit my feelings of like I love it but I hate it, for this remake. Um because guess what? I completed it, and I found myself on one night earlier this week. I was like, I don't have anything to play. I'll just go like trophy hunt or do something else on Resident Evil 4. And I
Really?
went back even though I was like, I want this to be over. And
I
so
had the
that's the
same
beauty of
experience. I didn't go back and replay it, but I left it installed for a while, and I just because I was like I'm getting that itch, but also
yeah.
I every time I would be bored as hell, I would think, I'm done. I'm done for the day at least. And I would put it away, and an hour I'd be back in there playing for another 2 hours. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
stop
Yeah.
myself from playing the game. I don't know what it like. Again, I don't want to be like I'm not at all saying that it is a bad game. It is not at all. It is there
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like you made me pay $70 because I trusted you with what you did with with what they did with Resident Evil 2 and 3, and it is it feels like a much longer game than Resident Evil 2, and I
Yeah.
stuck with
There's a
it.
lot to do.
Yeah, and I stuck with it every turn. I was going to, blue medallions, I'm shooting all those guys. It wasn't about trying to race to the finish line. And even like when I was racing to the finish line at the end, like I would still, if I saw like rats or something, I'd be like, I bet you there's a thing for killing rats. I would start shooting rats like when I'm low on ammo, like, and I'd be like, you never know, and I just the game did something to me. It really did. But to your friend's point about story, I get that. I totally get that. For some people, story isn't important in games. For them, I get that. For me, it is always important. For me, it's not for every game, but for these types of games, absolutely, story is key for me, because it is what will keep me going when I am terrified, because I want to know, or I want to get that guy, or I want to get to the bottom of this case, or whatever the case may be. And I remember thinking about, there must be something in this narrative that's pulling me through, because I don't enjoy the environment. I found the environment quite boring after a while. It's at a certain point, it's rock face. There's only so much you can do with that.
Yeah. The village is the best part to me. The first part of the game, and we're out of it, and then the castle's fine. Like, it's memorable. The more you play it, but
there was
the village,
there's no houses that there's no like, I want to go to that
no.
house because there's some nice stuff in there. Like it felt like the same person lived in every single house.
Well, and that's so that is what, like, I think is the beauty of Resident Evil franchise to me. Like, whenever the games are at their peak, is the 1 and 2, like even the remake of 1, the remake of 2. It's you're thrown into this environment, everything is locked, and it starts to develop throughout. And so it's coming back to certain areas, and it's how, like, the place that you're in changes. You get a little bit of that in the village, and then it abandons that and becomes a very linear story, which is what, then you flash forward to 5. 5 is literally just a path. It's not about like circling back in a maze. And that's where the best moments in the franchise happen, with Mr. X busting into a room that you thought was a safe room.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, I'm safe in the hall. He doesn't come in here. And then he's in there the next time you go in, or like, it's about how the environment develops. And so, like, it all works together, and that's why Resident Evil 2 is just the perfect mixture of all of it. But it starts out that way in 4, where you're like, okay, I'm going through the village, and like, where I think the pacing gets me in 4 is like, at every point I'm like, okay, I did what I needed to do, like whatever, like it said, like, go save Ashley or whatever. Um, and I'm on to the next part. The game is gonna be over, right? And then it's not. It's the next section. It keeps growing and getting bigger. And so the pacing is kind of like, okay, I'm tired of this. And it doesn't help that it doesn't change up any. It's okay, I got Ashley, I got to the new section, she gets taken. I got Ashley, I got to the new section, she gets taken. Like,
She's always,
and so it's very daunting.
It's very dragging it out. Like, it really, if this was a movie or a TV show, you would have been like, yeah, you could have cut like huge sections of this. You know.
Yeah, exactly. It's not tight.
Yeah, it's not. No, and it's funny because going back to the story, you've got, I think so often I was just saying to myself, who's that? Like, should I know this person? Like, I feel like I should know who this guy is or who this person is. Like, Ada Wong might as well not be in this game. And she but I wanted her to be my sidekick so much in this game, or I wanted to play as her at certain points in this game, like change perspective or something. And
they changed the way she's introduced too.
Yeah,
and by throwing in a cutscene that isn't in from Leon's perspective, whereas I believe they hint at her in the original with like her gun, her like the little grappling hook, and then he sees her in like the one of the like bedrooms. Whereas now, like they just introduce her talking to Luis, like
no, I think
so.
if memory serves, you do see her through the bedroom and the grappling hook and all that first.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
Then
you
see her with Luis,
and then
yeah.
But they hold off on
yeah.
on you actually like the reveal.
Yeah.
So
and it is from her perspective. There's lots of like changing positioning, which I didn't like in this game. Like this is a screenwriting thing. Be careful of changing the positioning of the audience. Like if you are going to cut away to something that our protagonist is not going to see, like you've got to have a reason for it. I'm working on a script right now for a producer, and we did that. We had to tread very carefully on that idea but we justified it because that character that we cut away to is going to become like the sidekick in the second half of the movie. And so they are going to be standing alongside our protagonist for the rest of the movie. Whereas in this, Ada Wong is not with Leon for a long, long chunk of this game. And even when she does come in, it's very, 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 very minuscule, really, her contribution. I remember at the very end, the boss fight on the pier, and she's tied up upside down, I think, is she, like up on a crane, and then Leon shoots the rope and she falls like a serious distance and crashes down onto the steel iron surface of the dock, and I'm like, Leon just killed her. Like, and she's fine, of course. She gets up and she's like doing acrobatics and everything. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I can't even, like, the gameplay can be as action packed as you want. It can be, but she just fell to her death. Like, she's got a broken neck at the very least. Like, it is ridiculous. They're not even trying. It's just all this over the top stuff where everyone can run and jump like it's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But then there are other parts where the characters aren't able to do that. Like there'll be these other moments where your character is so grounded, like and so like handling themselves like a real, like a proper, like I'm stumbling into bear traps, like an idiot. But then in the cutscenes, like I'm flying all over the place like I'm Bruce Lee, and it's just, come on, like, but
you can't even jump in this game.
I never understood that. I never understood why games you can't jump. I'm not asking for like Nathan Drake platforming here. I'm just saying, just jump. Even if it doesn't have any value in the game, just making me feel like I can jump just gives me some sense like I have control or mastery over my body in this game. Like, I don't know. Anyway, but it was, these characters are being presented in very ridiculous ways. They're being written into the story in ways where it does feel like it's just, it'd be great here if we had a sidekick character for a while, like the military, who's the guy who, the guy who orchestrated the kidnapping, the colonel, or whoever, the guy with the beret, Krauser, yeah. Have we ever met him before? I don't feel like.
I think it's in something non-main line.
Your reaction,
entry.
Your reaction says it all.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like. But it acts like you should absolutely know.
Yeah, like I should know. I should care. It's like I'm supposed to, it's like,
or it just happens in between and he trained him.
Yeah, but it's like this idea where he just comes in when it's time to reveal the master plan, and I'm like, why don't you show it to me at the beginning and have Leon be like, I'm here for Ashley, but I'm really here to get that son of a bitch, and just have it be fuel for a fire, not just something that comes in at the end, or that comes in like 3/4 of the way through the game. And then I was thinking like, there are moments where you'll see mines, or you'll see like, the wire traps and stuff, and I'm thinking, for a while I was thinking, oh, that's Ada. I bet you she did that stuff to kill the zombies, or to cover her tracks, whatever. And then when I'm like, oh, it's probably Krauser. But then I thought, does it really matter which one of them did it? No. Like I
No.
just don't. I'm not invested. I'm really not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, what would you do differently? What if you're remaking this and you're like throwing caution to the wind? What are you doing? What are you doing to, like, narrative wise, gameplay wise? We'll leave as is, because I think unless there's some real bone to pick with it. But like I said, I mean,
narrative. I mean, the gameplay's perfect. Like,
Yeah.
like it's
But make better use of stealth. That's what I would say. But okay,
that's
story wise.
I would pull it back as far as scale. Like, just, it feels like you're just doing too much instead of like circling back, and like how Resident Evil 2 does it. It'll introduce new areas that you never come back to, but those are like side parts to the game. And so I think I would do that, and like scale back. I mean, there's so many villains in here. Like, Salazar just comes up and is like laughing at you, making jokes, but then there's also the threat of what's the family dude, the main boss that you fight at the end. I know his name, but it's escaping me right now.
The priest or whatever, I don't know. Like
I'm blanking on it, but so like you have them, and then you have Krauser, and it's like, okay, but who should I feel like most like
animosity towards, or
like is the main
like,
is the main villain?
Yeah.
Like they're all just kind of, instead of developing one and making one good, they're just all kind of underdeveloped. Whereas who's the lab guy into whatever that dude's name is.
I've never followed
the guy
any
who
of the
develops the
names
virus.
of any of the characters. I just,
So he's he has a very basic name, but he's the guy who creates the virus into, and you fight him throughout the game, and it develops who this person is, and it's like, oh, that's that guy, and it develops his story. Like, but that makes sense narratively to develop that guy. And yeah, so I don't know. I think that would be the biggest thing, like story wise, that I would hash out. It just feels like it's doing too much.
I would get rid of Ashley. Like, if this game was made today by the guys who did Dead Space, like not a remake, just like, guys, you're doing the new Resident Evil game, Ashley would be dead. Ashley would have been found on the side of a hill, her body discarded. Like her helicopter went down, or whatever it is. I don't know how she was kidnapped, and she just didn't survive. And now I'm stuck in this place and I need to get out. And then it's like, yeah, but before you leave, can you help me stop these bad guys, because they're up to no good. Like, I would go dark on this. I was thinking about how much I love Max Payne 3. I don't know if you played Max Payne 3. It is one of the legitimately unsung masterpieces of the PS3 era, that era. And one of the great things about it is it's a rescue mission, and a rescue mission goes horribly, horribly wrong, like grotesquely wrong, in very realistic, traumatic ways, that will leave a mark on your, for a few hours after you've played through those moments. And then the rest of it is just a full-on revenge mission. And it's so surprising, because you think, oh, I thought he was going to save the day. He doesn't. He really doesn't. And this is post-apocalyptic. This is Resident Evil. This is... Why do I feel like I'm playing like a Star Wars game? Like the kind of happy ending game. Like, why? Like, we just blew up a city in the previous one. And like millions of people died. and the rest of the world is suffering. Why? Like, they should have gone dark on this. This shouldn't be a damsel in distress story. This should be damsel and, oh, she's dead. And now what do I do? I'm just like, wow,
Oh,
like,
no. Yeah.
like anything could happen now, you know?
Yeah.
Because
You should really play Dead Space
yeah, right. I
because
should, yeah.
the narrative is you get a distress signal from your wife on the ship, and I think you told her to go or something. I don't want to get into spoilers,
but it's like there's
but
a darkness to it, yeah.
yeah, and so like the whole narrative throughout is like you're looking for her, but you're also uncovering the mystery of the ship and what went wrong, and you start to like that plays into the narrative design plays into the gameplay design very well, but it's also very sparse, and so
Silent Hill,
which this one does not do.
Silent Hill does it. You know, this idea where people have genuinely traumatic backstories and like terrible things happen. When did Resident Evil become the fairy tale franchise of the survival horror genre? I don't know.
At this point,
that's what
Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
That
that's what it feels
yeah.
like. And so I don't know.
Well, and that's that is.
I would shake that up. I would really like. Yeah, we're too late. Like that's what I would do. I would, because I don't think the escort mission stuff is that interesting. I don't think
it doesn't work in the original either. And
yeah,
they've changed it up here, and it still doesn't really work.
I never felt frustrated with it, and I love the idea when they grab her, they walk off with her, and you have to kind of chase her down. Like I thought that was cool, but generally,
oh my god, I shot her in the head so many times.
Yeah, I know. But every time she was by my side, I thought, oh no. Like she's now, I now have to look out for her, you know, and I could feel the fun just draining from the game.
It is very frustrating in the original.
Like with Metal Gear Solid 2 or 3, there were escort sections, and it was grand because it was just you leave her in one corner, you go over, you clear out the room, and then you go back and you escort her through this empty room, and you just knew, and it was just fast. It never slowed down. It never became a slow experience, you know, and in this, it always just felt like, I don't know, I'm on edge. But then I know that the whole point of these games is that you're on edge, but I never felt I was on edge for the right reasons. I felt I was on edge because of arbitrary things I had to do that made no real value to the narrative experience either, or my immersion in the world. And so I don't know. Whereas Alien Isolation, for example, you're on edge while you're exploring this world, while you're trying to get this thing to do this thing or whatever, and you're learning about the world as you do this, and at no point did I ever feel like I had to slow down for somebody else. It felt like I was moving at the speed of thought, like, and it was just a very, very fluid experience. Completely different games, of course, but even The Last of Us is a giant escort game, and it never ever feels like, you're not actually, you're not really responsible for Ellie, you know, would you play Resident Evil 4 again? Would you go through the extreme difficulties? Like, would you put yourself through the experience again?
So that's like the pacing of this one makes it harder for me to like to speed run. Whereas like 2, you could speed run that game. Like the trophy was 3 hours. This one's 8 hours. And so like but I'm probably gonna go play it. Like I don't know if I'll do the speed running, but there's enough to go do. There's mercenaries mode. There's so like I still enjoy it, but I might go back and play 2 now because it's been a couple years and I'm ready to.
Yeah, I really want to play 2, and we got to do a talk on that. I think I would go back. Yeah. I think I would go back to Resident Evil 4, but I think I would go into it with the idea that it is. I think I would go into it with a more realistic view. It's not a bad game. It's not at all. It's very much a game of 2005, but I don't think that's a free pass, because because Snake Eater, for example, was 2004, and as cheesy as that can be, it's a way more emotionally engrossing experience that is, with introducing new things, new backstories, new characters, and so on in a way that all feels very natural. And Kojima's far from the most competent storyteller, and I love Kojima, whole section dedicated to him. But but he does know the core principles of storytelling, and he knows how to set up stuff. He knows how to build worlds and stuff. I think they could have taken a page out of that book, given that it is a departure.
The cutscenes are beautiful in this game, but they're annoying because the story isn't there. And
I don't know why I'm watching
every time that I usually like cutscenes and like story breaks, and there's a lot in this for like that to break up the chapters and all that. But they're uninteresting for the most part.
I didn't understand why we had chapters in this. I understand why there might have been chapters in the previous version for loading screens or whatever, but I didn't get why we needed on a PS5 chapters. Again, it felt like it was a throwback to that's the way it was in the previous one. It's a remake. I don't care. Like, change it up. You're not. It's not like I have to choose for the rest of time whether I want to play this version or this version. I have the option to play both. And it always annoys me when people say, "Yeah, but that's the way it used to be." Like, no one is taking away your book and giving you the movie version instead, or no one's taking away the video game of Uncharted and giving you the movie version instead, or whatever. You can have both. You can take a risk, you can take a chance, and nobody, like, I never played Resident Evil 4. I was all in on this. I was buying it on day one, paying ridiculous money for it. And if you're a diehard fan of the game, you're playing it as well. So it's not like there's a commercial concern either. I get why you've got to tick certain boxes to get people to buy it, but I don't think you have to be so slavishly devoted to the story. And you could have shaken it up, changed it up, maybe adapted a little bit to tie in with recent games. I mean, this is suspicious. If you're an outsider like me, this is suspiciously similar to Village. The castle. The set pieces, the village itself. And I
honestly
link it up. Join the dots. Like, for me, like, because that's what I, as a total newbie to this, would want.
Honestly, like, Village does more story-wise for me.
Oh yeah, much more. Yeah, that's the thing, because that is a guy looking for his wife.
You have a character.
It's a guy looking for his daughter. It's a guy who is not a trained agent. It's a guy learning to shoot for the first time. It's like, that's like really good. They don't get enough credit. I know people don't like Ethan as a character, whatever, but he's a far more compelling character than Leon. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
Really, like,
in that arc in Village is very. It's interesting that they did it over 2 games with Ethan's story, but the arc in Village is actually there, So whereas here, there's not really anything.
And it's funny because all the Resident Evil adaptations we get, live action that we get, is always Claire or Leon or whoever, and it's like Ethan is right there, and he's a human character with human flaws and human skills, and he gets torn down and shredded bit by bit. He leaves everything in the ring. Like, audiences would care about that character on screen, and it's like, again, I'm like, I do wonder, is Village the remake of Resident Evil 4? Like, is that what we got? Like, and we're just not branding it that way. Like, I don't know. I just don't get the remake.
With Ethan's character, you also have Mia, who is, she's the special agent character. So you still have your Leon or your, like, that, like, you even bring in Chris. But yeah,
I don't know what I'm getting at with this point, but it does because obviously you can't just change Resident Evil 4 to be Village, but it does feel like Village is the Resident Evil 4 remake. And and
I mean, it was yeah.
or the like it's like the Force Awakens to A New Hope. You know, it's like it's the reboot remake, but it's not really a reboot remake. And yeah,
When they announced Village, I mean, Village is literally what the first section is called in Resident Evil 4, and they first announced they showed the merchant, so it's like, okay, like this is literally just like a greatest hits, but they actually did a really good story with it, you know, in Resident Evil terms. But
yeah, no, I really love that. We'll have to do a talk about that one as well. Look, I like Resident Evil 4. I don't love it, and the reason I'm so critical is because I have been told that you will love this game. This is the greatest. This is the one of the best. This is the greatest entry. Blah 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 of the franchise, and I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it. You know, so like, you know, tell me why this is in 2023 worthy of like 10 out of 10s from IGN and all that kind of stuff, because it does feel like they're looking at this with rose tinted glasses. I'm not wearing any rose tinted glasses, so I'm just calling it as it is.
Yeah. Don't break them.
Yeah. All right, thanks Caleb. Thank you very much, everybody. If you want to get more episodes like this, just go to our YouTube channel or search for our podcast, The Script Department. Just search for The Script Department wherever you get your content. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and don't forget you can buy us a coffee as well if you want to support the podcast. We'll be back soon with another discussion, and yeah, Caleb, we will definitely do Resident Evil 2 and 3 because I love Resident Evil 3 as well. Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, guys.